Welcome to Deep Thought, Philosophy and Behavior. Let me make sure I look good here. Anyway, philosophy and behavior. And when I talk about philosophy, I don't mean like a formalized philosophy where you have a thought leader speaking on certain things, or present a certain way of being. I mean, it's just a plain how you live in your life. Each individual who's not on social media, doesn't speak in front of people, can have a certain philosophy. See, the philosophy is think of your body as your car. And think about your NATO tendencies as like the car engine. Like, certain cars can go a certain speed, what it can do. But then think about your philosophy as the driver, your philosophy. And, when I say philosophy, it could be a religious philosophy, political, personal, whatever. How you going to approach things, because it affects everything. See, a lot of people might think something is natal, but just if you're born a certain race or something, because I have an example coming up about that. You have an example coming up about that, but no, it's about the philosophy really affects stuff. And let me use two examples why I would even say that. Let me use two examples. One, I remember there was a young man I knew, and he was Irish. And he went to the school I went to. I was still hanging around there. I had already graduated at American University. And he was a good guy. He was a real good guy. And his hair was light brown. Keep this in mind. And, he had the typical, he looked Irish. And he was cool. He was cool people. And I remember his specific behavior. He wasn't bad or anything. He was a good guy. But I remember he started hanging around some Middle Easterners, some Muslims. And I remember he would gradually changed. And he eventually became Muslim. But I remember as I was watching the change, one, he made his hair darker. He colored his hair blacker. And then another thing he did, his speech intonation changed. And how he moved changed. And what someone would say, well, what happened to him? He just changed his philosophy. It has a profound effect. Let me use another example. Now, we haven't heard anything recently, and this is usually something that white nationalists will use against blacks, talking about, well, they're genetically inferior. They get low IQ scores and all of that. And I would challenge that. Because there was a study done. And it said, well, hold up, these black kids who practice, I think it was Episcopalian denomination, had higher IQ scores. So I'm like, well, they're both black. And it's a bullshit thing anyway, but it illustrated something. Is it about the biology, or is it about the philosophy? If you test kids, like for example, if you were to use the IQ test on kids who grew up in a poor, impoverished neighborhood, they didn't get the same resources, the same family structure. Okay, that might be one thing, but then that's a philosophy in itself. But then versus some children who grew up in a two-parent household in a more moneyed area, or at least middle class, solidly middle class, is going to better schools. See, that's a part of philosophy. See, everything is about the thinking, and it affects your behavior. Let me use another example. Think about how someone's behavior is affected if their philosophy becomes being mindful and peaceful, not reacting in a certain way, behaving in a certain classy way. Like they say, you know what, I'm gonna meditate more, and I'm gonna change my eating patterns because of the philosophy I'm following. Say they follow a certain spiritual philosophy that says, okay, let's meditate more. Let's meditate. We're gonna wear our clothes differently. We're not gonna wear what everybody else is wearing. We're going to we're going to go vegan. We're going to not eat meat. It changes a whole lot. It changes a whole lot because think about like just the change in eating. It's not the same when you're vegan. Now, just to be clear, it's not like you're eating, a bunch of just carrots and all of that, but you're not eating meat. Now, that can affect your behavior, just a change in eating because, first of all, when you're eating meat and everything, it doesn't come out right away. Meat can stay in your stomach for about 2 months. That's going to affect your behavior. That's going to affect how you act. That's going to affect how you making bowel movements. Because everything, remember I talked about everything touches everything else. You might not have as much energy because, when you got stuff in your stomach, you get the itis. You get sleepy. But if you eat lighter and better food that goes through your system, shoot. In fact, there are many who have the philosophy that you can stay well by just eating better. And I've actually met some elders, they're in great shape, but one of the things they did was just eat a certain way, but that was part of their philosophy. See, you could be in an area, you could be in an area where the general philosophy is fight, fight, fight. So somebody look at you wrong, fight. Or always arguing or something, or someone else can have the philosophy. They're saying, no, I'm gonna stay calm no matter what. That's a philosophy. I'm gonna stay calm no matter what it is. I'm gonna calmly solve the problem. That affects how they react. I'll use an example how I use that in my own life. One of the things I use in my own life is remaining at peace. Remaining at peace when something comes up. Not getting upset right away. Yeah, it's tough. It's a definite practice. But remaining at peace no matter what. And I've noticed whenever something happens, I don't get upset right away. Because of that philosophy, I automatically go into a mode like, oh, this is a problem. What can I do to fix it? Let me look at it. Like sometimes, like say somebody misplaced their keys. I've seen people go off instead of just being like, oh, the keys ain't here. Let me see where I would have left them. Seriously. And it is a practice because, sometimes people just jump up. And it's a practice. It's bigger than just because it was something just remaining at peace that I cultivated. I consciously said, no, I'm going to remain at peace. You could say consciously, no, this is how you're going to behave when this happens. It affects your behavior, your philosophy, how you thinking. The whole point of this channel is about thinking. Because everything is based on that. Let me use the example. I use the example of a young Irish friend who, he changed his whole behavior around. One of the things with religion is a philosophy. And I've seen many of people. I've seen people because they just changed their religion, they changed their philosophy. Everything is different. I remember there was a woman I different. And now this wasn't religious based, but I remember there was a woman I met. She's one of the few women I actually approached on the street. Few women, very attractive. We went out the first time, and it was like, we went out again months later, and she was just totally different. I was like, what's happening? She said she kind of just let some things go. She changed her thinking. Let me use another example. There was a young lady I worked with on this job. And when we first started, I was training her. She had an issue with me. She had a serious issue. And she had that general, me and her eventually got cool, but she had a general issue like that, how she carried herself. I remember one time she came in, it was when I was working at this gym. She came walking in the gym. I was like, what the heck happened? Her whole demeanor and everything. And she said she just let some things go. Philosophy is thinking. She just changed her thinking about certain things. It's powerful because it's the driver. See, thinking is important. One of the things, it's so important to the point, a big issue out here is other people try to influence your thinking. And that's a whole other conversation. Shoot, if I ever bother doing a live, that'd be a whole other conversation. Whole other. And let me just hit y'all with something just real quick. I would consider doing a live here, but I had to have some snipers because the conversation would have to just be philosophy, just thinking. Even in disagreements, calm disagreements, as long as it's thinking. But we'll look into it. But, you know, if you think about it, your philosophy, your way of life, how you do things, it affects everything else. Where you want to live, the type of home you get. Say part of your philosophy is feng shui. It's how you place everything in where you live. Say your philosophy is working out. Like that's part of your philosophy, is constantly staying in the gym. Very important part of that. If you're thinking about it's going to affect what you eat, because you'll be counting calories and everything, but that's part of your philosophy. What type of clothes you wear, who you interact with, and everything. Maybe even where you live, because you're thinking, okay, I got to live close enough to a gym. I got to get this in. What you do for fun, everything. It affects your behavior, how you behave, how you interact, because your body is the car. Your body is the car. Your philosophy is what's driving it. You know, after I finish recording this, I'm gonna go to the gym. But that's part of my philosophy. That's part of my philosophy. And it's not about just being like super aesthetic or anything like that. It's about just the way of life. Because that's what my philosophy is, holistic, mind, body, and soul. But it affects other things. So I want y'all to think about that. See, when you're looking at someone's behavior, look at the philosophy. What philosophy they grew up under, you know, because it affects everything. It affects how they adorn themselves. Their philosophy could be, hey, I'm totally hedonistic, so they're going to dress in that way. They're going to draw attention to them. Or their philosophy could be, no, be conservative. I'm not going to be caught up in what the world is doing. And you see some people like on a spiritual level, people who practice spiritual, like go against the mainstream spiritual systems. And you'll notice they'll wear their hair different, they'll behave different, and everything. You can see the difference in somebody who's like hard charging, money, materialistic, versus someone who's like, you know, they just want to live a peaceful life. They just want to make enough money to keep the rent paid and everything. They're not buying clothes and all of that. But their behavior is going to be different. The hard charging person is like, oh, okay, I got to make that next dollar. The more peaceful person, they sit back and chill. Now, is that just purely on their natal thing? Now, it can influence it, like I said. But then it's a decision on how they do it, on what they do. You know? It's a decision. You know, even in that situation, because, you know, you got, people talking the black pill and everything. What if, a so-called Chad, they might have the genetics for it, but what if they say, you know what, I don't care about that. So they ain't hitting the gym, they ain't tightening up. They might have that sharp jawline, but they following a spiritual system where it's like, hey, my philosophy is let all of it grow out. Let all of it grow out, you know? So, you know, it's very important. It's the philosophy. When you look at somebody, they represent their philosophy, ultimately. That's why, and people who follow me a long time know I even have like webinars and Rom TV series on reading women in particular. But you can look at somebody, and get most people get a good idea of their philosophy unless they consciously hide it. But a lot of people don't consciously hide it. So you can get, I'd say maybe 70% of people, if you know how, have an idea about their philosophy or just philosophies in general, you can get an idea by how they adorn themselves. You know, how they wear their hair, how they wear their clothes, how they adorn themselves, what kind of jewelry do they wear? Because it's all symbols. And that gets into another conversation. But remember, philosophy influences behavior. They connected. You can't separate them. You can't separate them. So anyway, I want y'all to think on that and get back with y'all. Peace and blessings.